Chapter 1. The invitation. Reggie Briggs stared at the email subject line like it was a riddle he didn't want to solve. Eastwood High, class of 2015 reunion. RSVP today. He leaned back in his chair, the soft hum of his apartment's heater filling the silence. The glow from his laptop screen painted his face in pale light, and for a moment, he considered deleting the email without opening it. 10 years. 10 years since he walked out of those halls for the last time, swearing he'd never look back. He clicked it anyway. The message was cheerful, almost aggressively so, with exclamation points scattered like confetti. Join us for a night of fun, memories, and reconnecting. It promised cocktails, music, and a chance to see how far we've all come. Reggie snorted softly. He could already picture the scene. Old cliques huddled together, comparing job titles and Instagram-worthy vacations, pretending they weren't silently ranking each other. He rubbed his jaw, feeling the faint stubble there. He wasn't the same person they remembered. Not even close. Back then, he was the quiet kid, the one who sat in the back of the classroom hoping to be invisible. The one who carried extra weight and the shame that came with it. The one who learned early that silence was safer than speaking up. He wasn't bitter. Not anymore. Life had turned out better than he expected. Engineering degree, steady job, a small circle of hiking buddies who didn't care about high school hierarchies. He was fit now, strong even. He traded soda for water, late-night chips for early morning bike rides. He liked who he'd become. But none of that erased the memory of laughter, the cruel kind that stuck like burrs, or the sting of words he never fought back against. Reggie's finger hovered over the delete key. He could skip it. No one would notice. No one would care. Then a face flickered in his mind. A smile, soft and unexpected, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Sherry Carson. He hadn't thought about her in years, but the memory was sharp. She was quiet too back then. Not part of the popular crowd. Not loud enough to draw attention. Except for that one day, the day the cheer squad decided to make him their entertainment. He could still hear Amanda's voice, dripping with mock pity. It's so sad, isn't it? He's just pathetic. The laughter that followed burned hotter than any insult. And then Sherry spoke, calm, firm, cutting through the noise like a blade. You're pathetic for thinking that's funny. Just like that, the laughter died. Amanda rolled her eyes, muttered something, but the damage was done. To her, not him. For the first time, someone stood up for him. No strings attached. No expectation of thanks. He'd thanked her anyway. She smiled. That smile stayed with him longer than the shame ever did. Reggie exhaled slowly, staring at the RSVP link. He didn't care about the reunion. He didn't care about old classmates or their curated success stories. But he cared just a little about whether Sherry was happy. Whether life had been kind to her. He clicked, yes. The next evening, Reggie sat at his kitchen table, nursing a mug of coffee and wondering if he'd lost his mind. He wasn't nervous, exactly. Just curious. He imagined walking into that ballroom, seeing faces that once looked down on him. Would they even recognize him? Probably not. He didn't look like that kid anymore. He'd grown into his own broad shoulders, lean frame, confidence that didn't need to shout. Still, the thought of small talk made him cringe. His phone buzzed. A text from Mark, one of his hiking buddies. Mark, Saturday ride still on? Reggie typed back quickly. Can't. Got a thing that night. Mark, a thing? Sounds mysterious. Date? Reggie smirked. Not exactly. High school reunion. There was a pause. Then, Mark, why would you do that to yourself? Reggie stared at the screen, then typed, curiosity. Mark replied with a laughing emoji and a skull. Good luck, man. Don't let them rope you into karaoke. Reggie chuckled, setting the phone aside. He wasn't worried about karaoke. He was worried about walking into a room full of ghosts and wondering if any of them remembered his name. He finished his coffee, rinsed the mug, and stood by the window. Outside, the city lights blinked against the November dark. He thought about Sherry again. About the way her voice didn't shake when she defended him. About the way she smiled like kindness wasn't a transaction. He hoped she'd be there. He hoped she was happy. And if she wasn't, maybe they could laugh about it together. Chapter 2. Sherry's reluctance. Sherry Carson stared at her phone like it had personally betrayed her. Come on, it'll be fun. Her friend's voice chirped through the speaker, far too cheerful for the topic at hand. Fun. Sherry repeated, pacing her apartment. You and I have very different definitions of fun, Claire. Claire laughed. It's a reunion, not jury duty. Same energy, Sherry muttered, flopping onto her couch. Her cat, a lazy tabby named Oliver, lifted his head just long enough to glare at her before resuming his nap. Why would I want to spend an evening with people who thought I was invisible for 4 years? Not everyone was awful, Claire said. Besides, it's been 10 years. People change. Do they? Sherry asked, skeptical. Or do they just get better at hiding the same nonsense behind LinkedIn profiles and baby pictures? Claire ignored the jab. You need a night out. You've been working nonstop. When was your last date? Sherry groaned. Low blow. I'm serious, Claire pressed. You've been single for, what, a year now? 14 months, Sherry corrected automatically, then winced. Not that I'm counting. Exactly. You need to socialize. Who knows? Maybe you'll meet someone normal. Sherry snorted. Normal men are a myth, like unicorns, or affordable rent. Claire laughed again, but Sherry didn't join in. She wasn't bitter, well, not entirely. She'd just had enough of the dating circus. The apps, the awkward coffee meetups, the guys who thought quirky meant owning 3 ironic t-shirts and quoting The Office like scripture. She wanted something real, someone real. But lately, that felt like asking for magic. She glanced at the reunion email Claire had forwarded earlier. Eastwood High, class of 2015 reunion. RSVP today. The words made her stomach twist. High school wasn't hell for her, but it wasn't heaven either. Mostly, it was gray, days spent trying not to draw attention, hoping to slip through unnoticed. She'd managed, mostly, except for the times she didn't. The times she spoke up when silence would have been easier. Her mind flickered to one memory, the cheer squad circling a boy like sharks. Reggie Briggs. Quiet, soft-spoken, carrying more weight than any teenager should have to carry along with the cruelty that came with it. She remembered Amanda's voice, sharp and smug, and the laughter that followed. And she remembered stepping in. Not because she was brave, but because she hated bullies more than she feared backlash. You're pathetic for thinking that's funny, she'd said. Simple words, but they landed. Amanda backed off, muttering something about Sherry being uptight. Reggie had thanked her later, his voice small but sincere. She'd smiled. That was it. One moment in 4 years. But it stuck. She wondered what happened to him. She hoped life had been kinder. Sherry. Claire's voice snapped her back. You still there? Yeah, Sherry said, rubbing her forehead. Fine. I'll go. Claire squealed. Yes, I'll pick you up at 7. Don't make me regret this, Sherry warned. But her tone softened. Maybe Claire was right. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Worst case, she'd endure a couple hours of awkward nostalgia and escape with her dignity intact. She set the phone down and stared at the RSVP link. Her finger hovered, then clicked. Yes. Oliver opened one eye, unimpressed. Don't look at me like that, Sherry told him. It's not like I'm expecting anything. But as she closed her laptop, a thought lingered. Quiet, persistent. What if Reggie was there? Chapter 3. The arrival. Reggie Briggs pulled into the parking lot of the Eastwood Country Club and immediately questioned his life choices. The building glowed like a beacon of nostalgia or desperation, depending on how you looked at it. Strings of lights framed the entrance, and through the glass doors, he could see clusters of people already gathered, laughing too loudly, clutching drinks like props in a play they'd been rehearsing for a decade. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. He wasn't nervous, exactly, just bracing himself. He'd promised himself he wouldn't stay long. An hour, tops. Enough to satisfy curiosity, maybe spot Sherry, and then vanish before anyone tried to rope him into a group photo captioned, Squad Goals. He stepped out, adjusting the collar of his jacket. The November air was crisp, biting just enough to make him wish he'd worn gloves. He walked toward the entrance, his boots crunching against the gravel, and pushed through the doors into a wave of sound. Music, chatter, the clink of glasses. The ballroom was exactly what he expected. Too bright, too polished, and filled with faces that looked vaguely familiar, like characters from a show he'd stopped watching years ago. There were name tags, thank God, though most people had abandoned them in favor of announcing their achievements at full volume. Reggie scanned the room, his engineer's brain cataloging details automatically. Amanda, former Queen Bee, now sporting a designer dress and a laugh that sounded like it had been practiced in front of a mirror. Kyle, the football star, now slightly rounder, holding court near the bar like he was still captain of something. The air was thick with old hierarchies, repackaged for adulthood. He smirked. Some things never changed. He grabbed a drink, sparkling water, because he wasn't about to risk a tipsy conversation about remember when, and found a spot near the edge of the room. From here, he could observe without being observed. Perfect. Until someone called his name. Reggie. He turned, startled, and froze. Sherry Carson stood a few feet away, her smile warm and immediate, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Her hair was longer now, falling in soft waves over her shoulders. She wore a simple black dress, elegant without trying too hard. And her eyes, he remembered those eyes. They hadn't changed. Wow, she said, laughing as she stepped closer. It is you. Reggie blinked, then managed to smile. Yeah, it's me. I almost didn't recognize you, she said, giving him a quick hug that smelled faintly of vanilla and something floral. You look different. Good different, I hope, he said, trying for casual, though his pulse had picked up. Definitely good, she said, her gaze warm. But your eyes gave you away. That hit deeper than he expected. He swallowed, suddenly aware of how much that simple observation meant. Sherry, he said, her name tasting familiar and strange all at once. You look amazing. She laughed, a soft, genuine sound. Thanks. I was hoping I wouldn't regret coming here. Same, he admitted. I was planning to make a quick exit. Well, she said, tilting her head. Maybe we can regret it together. Reggie smiled, the tension in his shoulders easing. Deal. They moved toward a quieter corner, away from the peacocking crowd. For the first time that night, Reggie felt like he wasn't just revisiting the past, he was rewriting it. Chapter 4. Recognition and reunion banter. Reggie followed Sherry toward a quieter corner of the ballroom, weaving past clusters of people locked in conversations that sounded more like LinkedIn profiles read aloud. Did you hear? One man boomed as they passed. I just closed a 7-figure deal last quarter. Thrilling? Sherry whispered, her lips twitching. Do you think he practices that in the mirror? Reggie chuckled. Probably has a script taped to his bathroom wall. They reached a small table near the back, mercifully away from the spotlight of nostalgia. Sherry set down her drink, something pink and fizzy, and turned to him with a grin. So, she said, leaning against the chair, what have you been up to these last 10 years? Besides, turning into someone who could star in a hiking magazine. Reggie laughed, a little embarrassed. Engineering. I work for a design firm downtown. Mostly structural stuff, bridges, buildings, the occasional parking garage. Parking garages, she said, eyes wide with mock awe. Living the dream. Hey, he said, grinning. Those things don't build themselves. She laughed, and the sound loosened something in his chest. He hadn't realized how much he missed talking to someone who didn't treat conversation like a competition. And you? He asked. What's your story? Marketing, she said, with a shrug that suggested it wasn't her entire identity. I run campaigns for a tech company. Lots of buzzwords, lots of meetings that could have been emails. Sounds exhausting. It is, she said, smiling wryly. But it pays the bills. And occasionally, I get to be creative, which keeps me from throwing my laptop out the window. Reggie laughed again, and for a moment, the noise of the reunion faded. It was just them. Two people who once shared a hallway and a moment of kindness, now sharing something that felt like ease. You know, he said, tilting his head, I wasn't sure anyone would recognize me. Sherry's gaze softened. I recognized your eyes right away. That hit him again, deep and unexpected. He cleared his throat, trying to play it cool. Guess I owe them for staying consistent. They're good eyes, she said simply, and he had no idea how to respond to that without sounding like an idiot. Before he could try, a voice cut through the air like nails on a chalkboard. Well, look who decided to show up. Reggie turned, and there she was, Amanda, former cheerleader, current embodiment of smug nostalgia. Her smile was sharp, her dress expensive, and her tone dripping with faux sweetness. Reggie Briggs, she said, drawing out his name like it was a punchline. Wow, you look different. Reggie smiled, calm and steady. Amanda, good to see you. Her brows lifted, surprised he remembered her. I almost didn't recognize you. You're, what? Someone's plus one. Nope, he said, voice smooth. Just me. Amanda laughed lightly, the kind of laugh that begged for attention. Well, you've certainly changed. Reggie held her gaze, then said, almost casually, yeah, a lot's changed since high school. Like how I don't have to listen to people call me pathetic anymore. Amanda blinked, her smile faltering. What? You remember, Reggie said, his tone calm, almost kind. You said it loud enough for the whole hallway to hear. Color rose in her cheeks. That was, God, that was forever ago. True, Reggie said, smiling. But forever ago doesn't erase it. Amanda opened her mouth, then closed it, clearly scrambling for a comeback. Sherry watched, her expression unreadable, except for the faint curve of her lips. Reggie turned to Sherry, ignoring Amanda completely. Want to get out of here? Maybe grab coffee somewhere that doesn't smell like desperation? Sherry laughed, bright and genuine. Lead the way. And just like that, they walked out together, leaving Amanda standing in the wreckage of her ego. Chapter 5. The escape, the night air felt like freedom. Reggie held the door open for Sherry as they stepped out of the country club, leaving behind the hum of forced laughter and the faint scent of overpriced perfume. The parking lot was quiet, save for the distant thump of music leaking through the walls. Sherry exhaled dramatically, like someone surfacing from deep water. God, she said, shaking her head. That was something. Something? Reggie echoed, unlocking his car. Not sure what, but definitely something. She laughed, the sound warm against the chill. I think Amanda's face is burned into my brain forever. Mine too, he said, grinning as he opened the passenger door for her. Though I can't say I'm sorry. Oh, you shouldn't be, Sherry said, sliding into the seat. That was, honestly, legendary. Reggie climbed in, started the engine, and glanced at her. Legendary, huh? I'll take that. You should, she said, buckling her seatbelt. You handled that better than I ever could have. He shrugged, pulling out of the lot. 10 years ago, I would have just stared at my shoes and prayed for invisibility. And tonight? She asked, curious. Tonight, he said, smiling faintly. I remembered I'm not that kid anymore. Sherry studied him for a moment, her expression soft. You really aren't. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, like a shared understanding. Reggie turned onto the main road, the headlights carving a path through the dark. So, he said, breaking the quiet, coffee? Or do you have a better escape plan? Coffee sounds perfect, she said. As long as it's not one of those places where the barista judges you for ordering a latte. Reggie chuckled. No judgment zones only. I know a spot. Lead the way, she said, settling back in her seat. The cafe was small, tucked between a bookstore and a florist, with warm lights and the smell of roasted beans that felt like a hug. They claimed a corner table, steaming mugs in hand, and for the first time all night, the conversation flowed without effort. So, Sherry said, stirring her drink, tell me about this hiking thing. You mentioned it earlier. Reggie smiled. It started after college. I needed something to keep me moving, you know? I joined a small club, mostly weekend hikes, sometimes biking. It's peaceful. Clears my head. Sounds amazing, she said. I've always wanted to try hiking, but I'm pretty sure I'd trip over my own feet. Not if you have the right guide, he said, then immediately wondered if that sounded too much like flirting. Judging by her smile, maybe it wasn't a bad thing. And photography? He asked. You still into that? Her eyes lit up. Yeah, it's my escape. I love capturing little things. Shadows, colors, moments people miss. Like tonight, he said, teasing. You should have taken a picture of Amanda's face. Sherry laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. That would have been art. They talked for over an hour. About work, hobbies, the weirdness of adulthood. About how high school felt like a bad sitcom they'd both survived. Somewhere between laughter and quiet confessions, Reggie realized something. He didn't want the night to end. And judging by the way Sherry's gaze lingered on him, maybe she didn't either. Chapter 6. The first real date, Saturday morning, arrived crisp and bright, the kind of autumn day that begged for adventure. Reggie parked his car at the trailhead, the gravel crunching under his tires, and glanced at the passenger seat where Sherry sat, eyeing the hiking boots he'd loaned her like they were medieval torture devices. These look aggressive, she said, lifting one boot and turning it over like it might bite her. They're boots, Reggie said, grinning. They're supposed to look aggressive. They protect your ankles. My ankles have never needed protection, she muttered, tugging at the laces. They've been living a peaceful life. Until today, he said, stepping out and grabbing his backpack. Today, they're warriors. Sherry rolled her eyes but followed him out, adjusting her jacket against the brisk wind. The trail stretched ahead, a ribbon of dirt winding through trees painted in shades of gold and crimson. It was beautiful, quiet, except for the rustle of leaves and the occasional bird call. Okay, she said, standing at the start of the trail, hands on her hips. Full disclosure. If I trip and die, you're telling people I went out heroically. Reggie laughed. Deal. I'll make it sound epic. They started walking, the crunch of leaves underfoot filling the spaces between their conversation. At first, it was light, banter about the reunion, jokes about Amanda's face when Reggie called her out. But as the trail climbed and the air grew cooler, the talk shifted. So, Sherry said, adjusting her scarf, you really like this, huh? Hiking. Yeah, Reggie said, glancing at her. It saved me, honestly. She looked at him, curious. Saved you? He hesitated, then nodded. After college, I was still carrying a lot. Not just weight, but everything that came with it. The shame, the feeling like I'd never be enough. Hiking gave me something else to focus on. Something that made me feel strong. Sherry's expression softened. You are strong. Reggie smiled faintly. Took me a while to believe that. They walked in silence for a moment, the wind whispering through the trees. Then Sherry said quietly, I hated high school. Reggie glanced at her. Yeah, she nodded. Not because of grades or teachers, just the way people treated each other. Like kindness was a weakness. He thought about that, about the day she stood up for him. You didn't treat people that way. She shrugged. I tried. But most days, I just wanted to disappear. Reggie stopped, turning to face her. You didn't disappear. Not to me. Her breath caught, and for a second, the world narrowed to the space between them. The crunch of leaves, the warmth in his eyes, the way her heart suddenly felt too big for her chest. Then Sherry smiled, breaking the tension with a laugh. Okay, that was unexpectedly deep for a hike. Reggie grinned. What can I say? Nature brings it out of me. They kept walking, but something had shifted, something quiet and undeniable. The air felt different, charged with possibility. By the time they reached the overlook, a rocky ledge with a view that stretched for miles, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Sherry stood at the edge, breathless. Wow, she whispered. This is incredible. Reggie watched her, the wind tugging at her hair, and thought, yeah, it is. Chapter 7. Sparks and setbacks. The hike had ended hours ago, but the memory lingered, sunlight spilling over the overlook, Sherry's laughter echoing against the trees, the way her eyes softened when he told her she hadn't disappeared to him. Reggie replayed it like a favorite song as he drove home, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. By the time he pulled into his apartment lot, he was sure of one thing. He wanted to see her again. Soon. 2 days later, he texted her. Reggie, dinner Friday? My treat. No hiking boots required. He stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then hit send before he could overthink it. Her reply came quickly. Sherry. Would love to, but might need to rain check. Work's a nightmare this week. Reggie frowned, reading it twice. Rain check. 2 words that sounded harmless but felt heavy. He typed back, Reggie, no worries. Another time. He set the phone down, but the doubt crept in anyway. Was it really work? Or was she politely backing away? He hated that his brain still defaulted to old insecurities, the ones that whispered he wasn't enough. Meanwhile, across town, Sherry stared at her phone, groaning. She wanted to throw it into the nearest river. Not because of Reggie, God no, but because her boss had just dumped a last-minute campaign on her lap with a deadline that laughed in the face of sanity. She typed quickly, Sherry, promise I'm not flaking. Just drowning in meetings. Can we do next week? She hit send and hoped he understood. She liked him, more than she expected, which was terrifying, because liking someone meant risking disappointment, and she'd had enough of that to last a lifetime. Reggie saw the follow-up text an hour later, but by then, the doubt had already done its damage. He replied with a simple, Reggie, next week works. No smiley face, no joke, just words. Sherry stared at the message, her stomach sinking, felt distant, like a door closing softly. The week crawled by, heavy with silence. Reggie kept busy. Work, a bike ride, a night out with his hiking group, but every time his phone buzzed, he hoped it was her. It wasn't. Sherry, meanwhile, buried herself in deadlines, but every time she paused, her thoughts drifted to him, to the way he looked at her on that trail like she mattered. She wanted that again. She just wasn't sure if he still did. By Friday night, Reggie sat on his couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he'd imagined the spark. Maybe she'd realized he wasn't what she wanted. Maybe he'd been foolish to hope. And then his phone lit up. Sherry, survived the week. Still owe you dinner. Tomorrow. Reggie stared at the message, relief flooding him so fast it almost made him laugh. He typed back, Reggie, tomorrow sounds perfect. But the doubt lingered, quiet and sharp. Because wanting someone was easy. Trusting they wanted you back. That was the hard part. Chapter 8. Clearing the air, the cafe smelled like cinnamon and second chances. Reggie sat at a corner table, nursing a black coffee and trying not to look like someone rehearsing apologies in his head. He wasn't sure why he felt tense. Maybe because the last week had been a slow drip of doubt, and now he was about to find out if he'd been imagining everything. The bell above the door chimed, and there she was. Sherry walked in wearing a soft gray sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a loose twist. She spotted him instantly, her smile warm but cautious, like she wasn't sure if the air between them was still clear. Hey, she said, sliding into the chair across from him. Sorry I made you wait. You didn't, he said quickly. I just got here. She raised an eyebrow. You've got a half-empty cup. He grinned sheepishly. Okay, maybe I got here early. Her laugh loosened something in his chest. He'd missed that sound. They ordered, she went for a caramel latte because of course she did, and for a moment the conversation stayed light. Weather, work, the cafe's questionable playlist. But the silence that followed wasn't the easy kind. It was the kind that carried weight. Reggie cleared his throat. So, about last week. Sherry looked up, her expression softening. I'm sorry. He blinked. For what? For making you think I was flaking, she said, wrapping her hands around her mug. I wasn't. Work was insane. And I didn't want to text you something half-hearted when I was drowning in deadlines. Reggie exhaled slowly, the knot in his chest loosening. I figured it was work, but I guess old habits die hard. Old habits? She asked gently. He hesitated, then said, spending years feeling like the last choice. It messes with your head. Even now, when I know I'm not that kid anymore, sometimes I still hear the echo. Sherry's gaze softened, and for a moment, she didn't speak. Then she reached across the table, her fingers brushing his hand. You're not the last choice, Reggie. Not to me. The words hit like sunlight breaking through clouds. He swallowed hard, trying to find something clever to say, but all that came out was, that's good to know. She smiled, her thumb grazing his knuckles before she pulled back. And for the record, I was nervous too. He blinked. You? Nervous? Terrified? She admitted, laughing softly. Because I like you, and liking someone means risking disappointment. And I've had enough of that to last a lifetime. Reggie stared at her, the cafe noise fading to a hum. You like me? She rolled her eyes, smiling. Don't make me say it twice. He grinned, the tension melting away. Guess that makes 2 of us. They sat there for another hour talking about everything and nothing, childhood scars, favorite movies, the absurdity of dating apps. By the time they left, the air between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was light, charged with something new. Something worth risking. Chapter 9. The turning point. The rain wasn't supposed to happen. Reggie had checked the forecast twice before inviting Sherry over for dinner. Clear skies, mild evening. Perfect for his plan. Cook something impressive, share a bottle of wine, maybe sit on the balcony and watch the city lights. Simple, safe. But now, sheets of rain hammered against the windows like nature was laughing at him. Wow, Sherry said, stepping inside and shaking droplets from her hair. When you said cozy night in, I didn't realize you meant storm survival mode. Reggie grinned, taking her coat. Adds atmosphere. Adds frizz, she muttered, running a hand through her damp curls. I look like a cautionary tale. You look fine, he said, and meant it. More than fine, actually. She looked like someone who could make a thunderstorm feel like background noise. The kitchen smelled promising. Garlic, herbs, something simmering in a pan. Sherry peeked over his shoulder. Fancy, she said. What are we making? Chicken piccata, he said, trying to sound confident. Or something resembling it. Resembling? She teased. That inspires confidence. He shot her a look. I've done this before. Aha, she said, leaning against the counter. Define before. Once, he admitted. And she laughed so hard he almost dropped the spatula. They cooked together, which quickly turned into chaos. Sherry tried to help, but her knife skills were enthusiastic at best. Are you trying to dice that or destroy it? Reggie asked, eyeing the mangled lemon. Artistic interpretation, she said, grinning. You wouldn't understand. Then the pasta boiled over, the sauce sputtered, and somehow, he still wasn't sure how, the smoke alarm went off. Perfect, Sherry said, fanning the air with a dish towel. Dinner and a concert. Reggie groaned, yanking the pan off the heat. Okay, new plan, pizza delivery. Best plan you've had all night, she said, laughing as the alarm finally silenced. By the time the pizza arrived, they were sitting on the kitchen floor, backs against the cabinets, sharing a bottle of wine and laughing until their cheeks hurt. The rain drummed steadily outside, but inside, everything felt warm, easy, like they'd been doing this for years. Reggie watched her laugh, her head tipped back, and something in his chest shifted. He didn't want this to be just a moment. He wanted more. More nights like this, more laughter, more of her. Sherry caught his gaze, her smile softening. What? He hesitated, then said quietly, I like this. Her eyes held his, steady and bright. Me too. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, charged with something that had been building for weeks. And then, without thinking, Reggie leaned in. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like testing the water. Then deeper, warmer, as if they'd both decided at the same time that this wasn't a mistake. When they finally pulled back, breathless, Sherry laughed softly. Guess the rain wasn't such a disaster after all. Reggie smiled, his forehead resting against hers. Best storm I've ever had. Chapter 10. Clearing the air, the cafe was quiet, the kind of quiet that made every clink of a spoon sound louder than it should. Reggie sat at a corner table nursing a black coffee, his thoughts tangled like headphone wires. He'd been replaying the last week on a loop, texts that felt too short, silences that felt too long. He hated how easily old doubts crept in, whispering that maybe he'd misread everything. Then the door opened, and Sherry walked in. She spotted him instantly, her smile tentative but real. Reggie stood, and for a second, neither of them spoke. Then she said softly, Hi. Hi, he echoed, pulling out her chair. Glad you made it. Me too, she said, sitting down. Sorry about everything. The rain check, the radio silence. It wasn't you. Reggie nodded, trying to keep his voice even. Work stuff, she confirmed, then sighed. And me stuff, he frowned. Me stuff. She stirred her latte, eyes fixed on the swirl of foam. I've been scared. Not of you. Just scared of liking someone again. Reggie blinked, the words hitting harder than he expected. Why? She looked up, her gaze steady now. Because every time I've let myself care, it's ended badly. Guys who ghost. Guys who lie. Guys who make you feel like you're too much or not enough. I got tired of it. Reggie's chest tightened. I get that, he said quietly. I spent years feeling like I wasn't enough. High school drilled that into me. Took me a long time to shake it. Her expression softened. You seem pretty unshakable now. He smiled faintly. Not as much as I look. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of honesty settling between them. Then Sherry said, almost shyly, I like you, Reggie. I just needed to say that out loud. Reggie's heart kicked hard against his ribs. I like you too, he said, voice steady but warm. And I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to. Her smile broke like sunlight through clouds. Good, because I was starting to think you'd given up. I thought you didn't want me to try, he admitted. Guess we're both bad at assumptions, she said, laughing softly. Reggie grinned, the tension melting away. So, dinner tonight? No rain checks. No rain checks, she said firmly. And maybe dessert too. Deal, he said. And for the first time in days, everything felt simple again. Chapter 11. The turning point. The rain wasn't supposed to happen. Reggie had checked the forecast twice before inviting Sherry on another hike. A shorter one this time, just enough to stretch their legs and escape the city noise. But halfway up the trail, the sky betrayed him. Clouds rolled in like an ambush, and then came the downpour. Perfect, Sherry said, standing under a tree that offered about as much protection as a napkin. Her hair clung to her cheeks, her jacket soaked through. Absolutely perfect. Reggie laughed, even as water dripped from his nose. Hey, at least it's not snow. Yet, she muttered, glaring at the sky. Give it 5 minutes. He grinned, pulling off his backpack and rummaging through it. Lucky for you, I came prepared. She raised an eyebrow. Please tell me you have a tent in there. Better, he said, triumphantly holding up a neon orange poncho. One size fits all. Sherry stared at it. That looks like something you'd wear to direct traffic. Fashion forward, he said, shaking it out. Come on, we'll share. Share? She repeated, incredulous. That thing barely qualifies as clothing. Trust me, he said, stepping closer. It's either this or hypothermia. She sighed dramatically but moved under the poncho with him. Their shoulders pressed together, the thin plastic rustling as rain hammered down. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't Instagram-worthy. But it was something else. Something warm despite the chill. Okay, Sherry said, laughing as the poncho slipped sideways. This is officially the least romantic date ever. Reggie smiled, his breath mingling with hers in the damp air. Funny. I was just thinking the opposite. Her laughter softened, fading into a silence that felt charged. She looked up at him, rain glistening on her lashes, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the space between them. Their shared warmth, the steady rhythm of rain, the way her eyes held his like they'd been waiting for this. Reggie, she whispered, and he didn't know if it was a question or an answer. He just knew what he wanted to do. He kissed her. It wasn't planned. It wasn't perfect. It was rain-soaked and messy and absolutely right. She kissed him back, her hands gripping the poncho like it was the only thing tethering her to earth. When they finally broke apart, breathless and laughing, Sherry said, well, guess this date just got an upgrade. Reggie grinned, his heart pounding like he'd just conquered Everest. Best hike ever. And for the first time in years, he believed it. Not because of the trail, but because of her. Chapter 12. Full circle. The restaurant buzzed with soft chatter and clinking glasses, but Reggie barely noticed. He was too focused on the woman sitting across from him, laughing at something he'd said about parking garages being the unsung heroes of modern architecture. Sherry's smile was easy now. No hesitation, no guarded edges, just warmth. It had been months since the reunion, months of hikes and coffee dates and late-night conversations that stretched until neither of them wanted to hang up. And tonight felt different. Not because of the candlelight or the fancy menu, but because of what it meant. They were here together not by accident, not by nostalgia, but by choice. Reggie raised his glass. To surviving high school. Sherry clinked hers against his, eyes sparkling. And thriving after. They drank, and for a moment, Reggie let himself marvel at how far they'd come. 10 years ago, he couldn't imagine sitting here like this, confident, happy, with someone who saw him for more than the quiet kid in the back row. Do you ever think about that night? Sherry asked suddenly, setting her glass down. The reunion, he said. Or the hallway incident? Both, she said, smiling. Feels like a lifetime ago. It was, he said softly. But, I'm glad it happened. Me too, she said, her voice warm. If I hadn't gone, I wouldn't have found out you turned into a hiking superhero. He laughed. Superhero's a stretch. Not really, she said, tilting her head. You saved me from the worst night of small talk in history. And you, he said, leaning in slightly, saved me from thinking high school was all bad. Her smile softened, and for a moment, the noise around them faded. It was just them, like it had been on that trail, like it had been in the quiet corner of the reunion hall. Two people rewriting old stories into something new. Later, as they walked out into the cool night, Sherry slipped her hand into his without a word. Reggie squeezed gently, his chest tightening in the best way. Next adventure? She asked, glancing up at him. Anywhere you want, he said. She grinned. As long as it doesn't involve boots that look like medieval torture devices. He laughed, pulling her closer. Deal. And as they strolled under the streetlights, Reggie thought about that smile. The one that started it all. The one that still felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Chapter 13. Epilogue. 6 months later, the trail looked different. Spring had painted the trees in fresh green, and wildflowers dotted the edges like confetti. Reggie adjusted the straps on his backpack and glanced over his shoulder, grinning at the sight behind him. Sherry was crouched near a patch of violets, camera in hand, her hair catching the sunlight like spun gold. She looked up, caught his gaze and smiled. The same smile that had haunted him for years, the same smile that had rewritten everything. Almost ready, she called, snapping one last photo before jogging up to him. You're patient. I've had practice, he said, offering his hand to steady her as she climbed the last rocky step. Her fingers slipped into his easily, like they belonged there. They reached the overlook together, the valley stretching wide and endless below. Sherry exhaled, setting her camera aside. Still incredible. Still you, Reggie said softly, and she laughed, leaning into him. They stood in silence for a while, watching the world breathe. Birds wheeled overhead, the wind carried the scent of pine, and somewhere far below, a river glinted like silver. You know, Sherry said, her voice thoughtful, if someone told me at the reunion that I'd end up here with you, you'd have laughed, Reggie finished. Hard, she said, smiling. But I'm glad I was wrong. He turned to her, heart steady and sure. Me too. Her hand found his again, warm and certain. So, she said, eyes bright, what's next? Reggie smiled, the answer easy now. Everything. And as they stood together on the edge of the world, Reggie thought about the boy he used to be, the one who believed he'd never matter, and the woman who proved him wrong with a single act of kindness. The woman who was now his future. The smile that started it all was still there. And this time it was his to keep.